We got to talk about the NFL here. Obviously, the big news coming down from yesterday: Trey Lance, the former third pick in the draft of the 2021 draft, I saw five quarterbacks go on that draft to teams that now Trey Lance is on his way to Dallas. San Francisco traded him yesterday for a fourth round pick in next year's draft. Dallas gets a third quarterback onto their depth chart. Jacob, just first overall reactions about Trey Lance going from San Francisco, which could have possibly been a dream scenario with Mike Shanahan, West Coast offense, a fast, athletic quarterback, to Dak Prescott has just one more person to look over on his shoulder with Trey Lance going to Dallas.
Martin, this is huge news, and we knew the moment that the 49ers announced Brock Purdy as pretty much the starter before they've even seen him healthy yet this season. We knew Trey Lance's days on the 49ers were numbered. Now, Martin, as for the trade itself, a fourth round pick, I think you can actually get something with a fourth round pick. And Martin, we're going to dive into this trade a lot. We're going to talk about what it means for both teams, but I wanted to kind of start off by revisiting just how crazy this trade is. Now, I know everybody has kind of had some time to let this sink in, but you trade 3 first-round picks for this guy. You miss out on a ton of great selections in the draft. Martin, when I'm looking at the colleges from the 2021 draft, in the lottery, you could call it, the NBA term in the NFL, in the top 14, I'm looking at teams like Clemson, Florida, LSU, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, USC, Penn State, who all produce pretty much great players at the top of this draft. You go to the 2 quarterbacks taken after Trevor Lawrence, who is won a division, Zach Wilson out of BYU, Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. It just goes to show teams are really trying to search for that next Josh Allen or even a Mahomes who goes to a Power 5, but it's not as popular. Teams are trying to stretch out now, and it hasn't exactly worked. But, Martin, we're talking about a guy who has only played in 8 NFL games. He's thrown 102 total passes. Some quarterbacks throw that over the course of just 2 games. 55% completion rate, 5-3 touchdown to interception ratio. We understand that Trey Lance did not get a fair shot. A total mismanagement by, Kyle Shanahan. However far up you want to go in the ranks in the 49ers organization, you could go. But this was a complete mismanagement. Martin, when this happened, I think we both called it out as a terrible idea, a terrible trade. And then to not even see it come out, it was wild. But Martin, later in this podcast, I will try to play devil's advocate and do something, because this is a situation that 99% of people kind of agree that Trey Lance almost got screwed over here. And he shouldn't have been drafted this high at all. He shouldn't have been a first-round guy. He shouldn't have gone to a contender, XYZ. So I will try to defend Trey Lance, defend the 49ers, but all in all, Martin, this is a terrible situation that we just saw. This could really wreck the 49ers in the future if they don't get a championship soon.
Well, I guess maybe it's because I'm older. Maybe because I just see through this. Maybe it has something to do with that. But I always act like kind of somewhat the grandpa on this podcast because I always go in the opposite direction, and I'm going completely in the opposite direction here. This trade is completely nothing. This trade isn't even on a Richter scale of moving anything. It would be like a 0.00 earthquake if it was ever registered on a scale like that. I mean, Trey Lance, I don't feel like got screwed. I feel like Trey Lance put himself in a position where he thought he was athletic enough to do whatever he wanted in the NFL. And Mike Shanahan comes from Kyle Shanahan comes from the Mike Shanahan scenario, and if you know anything about the Shanahan offense, it's not about doing whatever you want. It's timing, it's precision, it's an 8-yard, and it's meant to be thrown at 8 yards. It's not meant to be thrown at 12 or 14 or 6 or 7. You throw it at 8 yards. That's point blank. Period. and it didn't work in San Francisco. All this proves is really San Francisco and John Lynch didn't know really how to draft evaluate Trey Lance, and they found their guy. If you just take Jacob, if you just take Trey Lance and Brock Purdy and look at their college football numbers, who do you think has more snaps? Brock Purdy. Who do you think has more touchdowns? Brock Purdy. Who do you think has more experience? Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy was a 4-year starter at Iowa State with two legendary college football running backs in David Montgomery and in Brees Hall, who are now in the NFL. He had an entire system around him at Iowa State that got him ready to go to the NFL. He competed in a Big 12 championship game. This guy wasn't taking 7-5 football teams to seasons. He was winning games. He was winning 9-10 games, and he's the last pick in the draft. So your third overall pick doesn't work out, but the last pick in the draft somehow works out and becomes your prospect of the future quarterback. This is all on Trey Lance. Trey Lance had it in front of him. Trey Lance had the opportunities. He didn't capitalize on it. You can look at some of his preseason tape this season. He looks terrible. You can go back and look at the Bears game he lost last year in Chicago. He looked terrible. He did not look prepared. He did not look like he cared. He did not look like he was ready. He looked like he was just going out there using his legs, and that was that. So I think this is nothing with Trey Lance, and I think everyone's just blowing it up a little bit too much.
Well, I can agree on some points you made that, I mean, we're blowing up the news because there's nothing else to talk about. We're blowing up the media cycle in the NFL about a backup quarterback or a third-string quarterback. I can agree with you, Martin, that he did get, some opportunity to prove himself in practice. It's not like he didn't play a season at least, but the guy got hurt. He broke his leg. It was on the 49ers for taking him this high to begin with. Now, every quarterback would like to succeed in the NFL. They come into the league hoping to be great, but it wasn't a smart idea from the 49ers. And you are right that Trey Lance definitely underperformed. I read you his stats. Those are not great stats, but more those tell me that that's such a small sample size that we really didn't even get to see this guy get a chance. I'm disappointed that he was traded to the Cowboys and not a team at the bottom of the league. If he was traded to the Commanders, perfect. The Cardinals, even better. But to the Cowboys, where he's going to perhaps be the third stringer? Cooper Rush was solid last year when he played. And there's no way Dak Prescott's going to the bench or getting traded anytime soon with that contract and what he means to Jerry and with the Star right now.
But that's kind of my point, Jacob, is if you look at what the last few recent trades have been in the NFL, Arizona Cardinals leads the way with 2 trades. They traded away Isaiah Simmons to the New York Giants for a 7th-round pick, and they just traded for Joshua Dobbs to be their starting quarterback over Colt McCoy, and they traded away a 4th and the 7th to get him from Cleveland. So obviously, not even some of the dirtbag teams in the NFL wanted Trey Lance. It pretty much was that I guarantee you Dallas just called up San Francisco and said, 4th rounder, and they're like, all right, that's the best thing we're going to get.
But a 4th rounder to me, Martin, actually, if the 49ers are making it seem like this guy in practice just stunk it up, here's the thing, though. The 49ers are a superb organization in the National Football League. Year in and year out, they find a way to be competitive. Not every team is as good as the 49ers. Trey Lance could suck in San Fran in practice, but do a lot better in a practice somewhere else. But that is a good point to bring up, Martin, of how no other team elected to trade for him. Now, when it comes down to a 4th rounder, Martin, there's guys every year somewhere in the 4th round who end up becoming a quality starter in the NFL for the team that drafted them or for a different team. San Fran can now trade this 4th rounder or a different 4th rounder and get back perhaps another player that could fit somewhere in their starting lineup, or just save it, piece it together, do something with it. It's an asset. And regardless of how you look at it, the 49ers really fumbled this. But they still can get something out of the fourth rounder. It's not a seventh. It's not a sixth. The odds on the fourth are a little bit better.
But I'll argue back with you again. And it's not to continue argument just to make the podcast interesting. This doesn't affect the Niners whatsoever, Jacob. Like we keep talking about this trade in the sense that like the Niners are like gonna go from all of a sudden 7-10 this season. They were just recently in the NFC Championship game. They're one of the highest picks to win the Super Bowl and one of the teams to come out of the NFC. They're in a position to win more games. They're in a position that this trade hasn't affected them at all. Them losing the 3 first round picks, yes, they lose out on what would have been Waddle, Tyreek, and Chubb in the sense of the scenarios that afterwards happen in that trade. But San Francisco doesn't lose anything. They have a starting quarterback in Brock Purdy. They believe in him. They have Samuel, Ayuk, Kittle, McCaffrey, and that offensive line. And they have Fred Warner and Bosa on defense. They're good. They're not in a position
Okay,
where they're going to go
Martin,
from.
with the stars you just named, though, how many of those guys have had recent injury history? Almost all of those guys you named has had recent injury history. And the problem is not now. The problem is going to be 2-3 years down the line when your great players fade away. And if Brock Purdy is not, a standout quarterback in the NFL, it's going to be very apparent that you've whiffed on a lot of your recent picks, or you didn't even have them to begin with. That it's not a now thing, it's a future thing. So I can't agree with you that we might be making too big of a deal of it in the moment. It might need to wait for the 49ers if they're going to have a decline in the next 3 to 5 years or so. But Martin, maybe we should transition now to the Cowboys side of things, to the Lance side of things. Is there any way this guy actually gets in a game this season?
No, there's no way he gets in a game because simply put, you already brought it up. Cooper Rush is already the better quarterback in this scenario. It's not even a contest. Cooper Rush went 3-1 as a starter last year. The only loss was to the Philadelphia Eagles. And yes, they played an easy part of that schedule, and obviously they didn't put up an amazing amount of points in those 3 wins. They only averaged more than 22 points in all 3 games, so they didn't put up a record number amount of points. But when you have teeter totter Dak Prescott and you have a reliant backup in Cooper Rush, the only thing that's stopping Trey Lance from getting on the field is just injuries. But maybe that happens, but I don't even think if that scenario came up, they would trust Trey Lance. No matter how you look at this, I still look at the fact that Trey Lance blew his opportunities. Whether he was given the right opportunities or not, something happened between him and Shanahan said, fine, go away, get rid of him, do whatever. I don't care at this point. And Trey Lance agreed to it. So I think, again, this is more on Trey.
Every quarterback gets multiple opportunities in the NFL. You know, no matter how big of a bust you are, a second team is going to come grab you and give you some sort of shot in their practice facility like the Cowboys are. It works out. I feel like maybe not as common in the NFL, maybe more common in some other sports where things don't work out on one team, but then the second or the third team, the player can kind of grow into somewhat of what they were supposed to. Martin, looking at the ESPN depth chart for the Cowboys, now it's just the ESPN depth chart. Who knows what this will be by week 1, but Trey Lance is slotted at the 3rd spot, behind Cooper Rush and in front of Will Grier, who might be in danger of getting cut now. That's a tough spot to be 3rd. And it's more reacting to, oh man, this guy he really is a bust.
To label him a bust, I guess is the only term that you use for those type of players. I mean, he's probably, out of look, yeah, he could fight for Will Greer for that 3rd spot. That basically means either him or Will Greer are going to be the practice squad quarterback. Then the third string quarterback will be the clipboard guy, and then you got the backup, and then you got your starter. So basically, that's a battle who wants to carry the clipboard and who wants to go play with the potential players that want a shot at an NFL roster. So it's not a great scenario for Trey Lance. I mean, I just my whole thought on it is really, Jacob, is Trey Lance really committed to football? Is he really committed to playing in the NFL? Is he another Johnny Manziel? Is he another Ryan Leaf? Is he another guy that just had a lot of abilities and got told that he would be in the NFL, that this is what his dream and his abilities were going to be, and that he should try to go after them? I mean, I seriously doubt that his abilities and his commitment to the NFL is there. That's my problem with this entire trade is we're trying to find a scapegoat for Trey Lance to say that, poor boohoo him, but I mean, is he really committed to the game? You have to be committed to the game. Otherwise, it's just a drag.
At the time of recording this podcast, it's Saturday afternoon before the Cowboys play the Raiders. So we do not know if Trey Lance is going to play in that preseason game against Las Vegas for Dallas. But Martin, taking a peek at the regular season schedule, not too long ago, earlier in the offseason, we discussed the NFL regular season over-under betting spreads. Martin, for the Cowboys, I think I said under. I'm not sure what you said. But they're at New York. They're at home versus, well, they have both New York teams to start off with. At Giants, home versus the Jets. But they have the Cardinals in the schedule. They have Washington in the schedule twice. Outside of that, they have a lot of doozies. They got some tough teams. Who knows what the Rams could be? But I'm not sure how many games could even be in the schedule where you could even see a situation where the Cowboys go up huge and they're like, why don't we just throw Lance out there for the last drive or two just to see what he does? It's tough to see a guy get drafted that high and then his career is essentially done before he's even thrown his 103rd pass. It's tough to think about that, but there's a lot that happens behind closed doors that we don't know, that we don't see, that teams get to see. And the NFL's a copycat league, and they don't copy the bad teams. They copy the good teams. And if a good team's not liking a player, maybe the bad teams don't want him either. Martin, as far as the Cowboys' schedule, you know how Dak went down with the ankle injury and was out for the season?
Yes.
Something could happen. I mean, anytime you go into a combat sport, a collision sport, really NFL is, not a combat sport. It's close to it sometimes, maybe in the trenches up with the big boys. But Martin, if say Dak Prescott got injured today and Trey Lance is the starter, how many wins do you think he could pull out?
Ooh, what's the over-under, though? The over-under was how many for Dallas was 9.5?
I think 9.5 is correct. Somewhere around there.
Okay, let's take that number. Let's take that number. Let's say, I'll even add more to the scenario. Let's say the Cowboys are 3-0 after 7 games and Prescott is hurt and Cooper Rush comes into the game and somehow he gets hurt and then Trey Lance gets the opportunity. I say they would go under for the rest of the season. I can't get behind him, dude. I'm sorry. I can't get behind Trey Lance. I don't even think it's just the system. I don't think it's just the team. I mean, he went to a good organization, dude. It's not like he went to Miami or Cincinnati or Detroit or Cleveland or the Chargers or the Cardinals. He went to the Niners. The Niners have been known for developing quarterbacks. Joe Montana, Steve Young, Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick for a moment. Obviously with Brock Purdy. So I mean, with Jimmy Garoppolo, they made that work and made it to a Super Bowl. So I still hamper on that, regardless of wherever Trey Lance went, and whoever he was going to get paired up with, in whatever scenario he was about to be thrown in. I don't think his commitment to the NFL is there. I think he's just going through the motions. I don't think he really cares that he's going to Dallas. I don't even think he cares that if he's going to be on the roster.
Martin, another kind of wrinkle to this conversation I wanted to have is with the 49ers. Now, everybody's going to bash on these guys. The thing is, the modern NFL, postmodern NFL, is all about having an elite quarterback. Back then, it was having the run game. It was having the defense. We're starting to see these teams with great quarterbacks, great OCs, stable head coaches, quarterback coaches, O-line, everything fit together, and the quarterback is that talented, and the defense is top 15, you got some skill guys, that's a team that's going to win the Super Bowl. And everybody's trying to emulate that. Everybody's trying to find the next Pat Mahomes, the next Josh Allen, Joe Burr. So to trade up in the draft to get a quarterback, I can't really knock on that. My team, Martin, just traded to your team a skill player and picks for a number 1 overall quarterback. It happens quite often. A lot of great quarterbacks in NFL history have been traded for. Another thing is the distraction. This is the prime difference between winners in the NFL and the Dallas Cowboys. The 49ers realized, if this is a dead asset, we might as well make ourselves as competitive as possible and get rid of this for something. Having a player who's not going to play and having all this drama around Sam Darnold, around Brock Purdy, around a team that you're trying to go win a Super Bowl, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, they didn't want any of that. Jerry Jones, on the other hand, is addicted to the headlines. He feels this makes the Cowboys even more relevant. But Jerry, you remember the last time you had a quarterback that was making noise on your bench? Dak Prescott and Tony Romo? That storyline carried on through the entire season, and ultimately they didn't succeed. And it was the end for Tony. Could history repeat itself somehow in the best case scenario for Trey Lance? I don't know. But when it's time to get serious, when it's time to lock into the locker room, personalities in football probably matter more than any other team sport in America. I guess the personality of the owner matters too, and the Cowboys having all this noise now on their bench is not going to be good. It's not.
I don't feel bad for the Cowboys. That's for darn sure. I don't feel bad
No,
for
I
the
don't feel bad
Cowboys.
for him either. It was a dumb move.
I think the Niners got us in there. I think the Niners got out of a perfect situation that they don't have to deal with Trey Lance. John Lynch has come out and said, "I screwed up that pick." I mean, listen, we all know the rumors around that draft were that if they made the trade up, it was to get Mac Jones. That's what Kyle Shanahan wanted. None of them wanted Justin Fields. That was the concern. Also, is that this move Justin Fields. So I'm glad he fell to the Bears. But to the Cowboys, I mean, this again. You mentioned it, headlines and the addiction to that. Yeah, I agree with you because when you look at it, again, I brought up Johnny Manziel. Who wanted to draft Johnny Manziel? Dallas, and they were right there to take Johnny Manziel if Cleveland would have taken Zach Martin at the 19th pick. So there was a scenario there for Johnny Manziel to end up in Dallas to back up who? Tony Romo. Obviously, they take Dak Prescott in the fourth rounder. They get him to back up Tony Romo. Romo gets hurt in the preseason. Dak Prescott carries them to 11 wins and loses to Green Bay in the divisional round. And then you obviously have with Trey Lance coming in now. This is just to create headlines. I agree with you on that. This is just to create noise. This is just to make it bigger than what it's supposed to be. That's who Jerry Jones is. I mean, he lives for that type of stuff. The same dude that brought in Terrell Owens when Bill Parcells, don't you do that. This is the same dude that just wants to hang on to everything that reminds him of 1995, 96, the last time the Dallas Cowboys were truly the dominant team of the NFL. So Jerry Jones gets to have his fun scenario. I don't know. I mean, seriously. Crazier things could happen after this. I don't know if Jerry Jones is going to trade Dak Prescott or Cooper Rush or make a tough decision. I mean, he doesn't fit Mike McCarthy's system. And this is a mess for the Cowboys, but this is a mess that they created. That's the thing about the Cowboys. They cannot turn around and crap on their own car, clean it up, and then turn around and look and get everybody to say, "Hey, look, I cleaned up my own car." We're all going to turn around and be, yeah, but you did it to yourself. We don't feel bad for them.
Same thing can be said with the Niners. Both ways. I like that analogy. Martin, college football is here. I know you're a big Notre Dame fan. They're playing as I speak. Do you have any comments that you wanted to finish off this podcast, since we've pretty much mentioned all there is to say about Lance, unless you have anything else to add? Do you want to say anything about college football, Martin?
Well, what I wanted to say is we'll do a podcast about it sometime later. All I wanted to talk about was college football realignment and all of that scenario and how everything's changing and whatnot. So we'll have a conversation about that one day. I think college football is taking a direction to where it could possibly never come back from. So, but to put the cherry on top of Trey Lance, I mean, I just don't feel bad for him in this scenario. He did it to himself. I don't think he's committed to the game of football. I think this is kind of his ticket way out, and I think he'll be a Josh Rosen, so I think he'll be done in about 3 seasons. I give it 3 seasons before he's really done.
Well, Trey Lance, Dallas Cowboy. Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, still San Francisco 49ers. Martin, I think we both agree that the Niners have better odds to go farther in the playoffs this year. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they can make it out of the NFC.
All right. Well, I'm Jacob Zimmerman. That's Martin Kelly. This is the Coin Flip Podcast. Martin, send us off.
Peace.